The air in the conference room feels colder than usual, a sterile, manufactured chill that seeps into my bones despite the frantic energy of the room. I'm standing just outside the main doors, heart hammering against my ribs, a sound louder than the muffled murmur of voices from inside. Through the narrow glass panel, I see him, my husband, standing at the podium, a smug, practiced smile on his face. And on the massive screen behind him, a slide appears. A very specific shade of blue. A unique font I designed myself. A graph charting market trends, compiled from data I spent weeks crunching. It's my work, my pitch. Every agonizing hour, every late night, every dropped call with friends, every canceled dinner. It's all up there, behind him. And beside him, perched on the edge of her chair, is Sarah. His associate. His mistress. Her head is tilted, a look of admiration on her face as she watches him. My stomach lurches. It's not just theft. It's a performance. A performance of my life's work, delivered to the world, to the people who hold the keys to my future, by a man who swore to share a life with me, doing it to impress the woman he shares stolen nights with. The chill deepens, freezing something inside me. The muffled sound sharpens into his voice, selling my vision, my dream, using words I poured my soul into. The betrayal isn't a knife, it's an ice pick, systematically shattering everything I thought was real. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Before all this, life had a rhythm. A steady, predictable beat. My world was contained within the comfortable, slightly worn walls of our apartment and the ambitious, buzzing energy of the city. I was building something mine. It wasn't just a job, it was a passion project that had slowly consumed my nights and weekends, a business concept I'd been refining for years, waiting for the right moment, the right opportunity. It was a solution to a problem nobody else seemed to see, wrapped in a pitch deck I polished until it gleamed. This wasn't just a pitch, it was my one shot. My chance to break through, to finally build the future I'd only dared to dream of. My husband, Mark, was comfortable. We'd been together for 10 years, married for 5. He worked in corporate development. Decent job, decent salary, predictable hours. We had the usual rhythm, shared dinners, weekend plans, the occasional argument about finances or chores. He was the steady one. I was the one with the restless ambition. We were partners, I thought. A team navigating the complexities of life and career side by side. I shared everything with him. Every breakthrough, every setback, every late-night panic attack fueled by caffeine and self-doubt. I'd talk him through the pitch details, practicing my delivery, asking for his feedback. He'd listen, offer generic encouragement, sometimes look bored. I never thought anything of it. He wasn't in my industry. He wouldn't get the nuances. That was fine. His support was enough. Or so I believed. My pitch was finally ready. It was the culmination of everything. Research, data, sleepless nights, pouring my heart onto slides. It was more than just a presentation. It was a piece of me. I felt an electric hum of anticipation mixed with sheer terror. I was scheduled to pitch to a major investment firm next week. This firm had a reputation for backing innovative, disruptive ideas. Landing this deal would change everything. For me. For us. The disruption started subtly. Mark became distracted, more secretive with his phone. Late nights at the office became frequent. The usual, I told myself. Work stress. Big project. I was too consumed with my own impending pitch to pay much attention. Then, the little things started to prickle. He'd ask specific questions about my pitch, not about the concept itself, but about the structure. The formatting. The file names. He'd casually mention things Sarah from his office said about presentations. Little details that, at the time, seemed harmless, just office chatter. The first icy drop of dread landed when I was looking for a file on our shared cloud storage. I was double-checking a source for a data point. I navigated to his work folder, something I rarely did, only because I knew he'd saved something there once. And I saw a file, titled, innocuously, Project Atlas _draft _V3. Atlas. That was the internal code name for my pitch concept. My blood ran cold. I clicked. It opened. It was my pitch. Almost slide for slide. The same unique design elements, the same carefully crafted language, even the quirky illustrations I'd commissioned from a freelance artist. But it wasn't the latest version. It was V3, an older draft. My hands started to shake. Why did he have this? I scrolled through. His name was on the title slide. Not mine. Just his. My mind raced. Had I shared it with him? Yes, I'd shown him early drafts. Had he saved it? Maybe. But why under a work project name? Why his name? A cold dread began to coil in my gut. I checked the metadata. The file was copied from my folder 3 weeks ago, modified extensively since then. By Mark. And one other user. Sarah's initials were in the user history. I felt a physical sickness wash over me. It couldn't be. He wouldn't. But the evidence was staring me in the face. He hadn't just saved it. He was working on it. With her. For what? I confronted him that night. Or I tried to. He came home late, smelling faintly of expensive perfume. Not mine. I held the laptop open to the file. My voice was trembling. Mark. What is this? He froze. His eyes darted from my face to the screen. A flicker of something, surprise? Guilt? Crossed his face before he smoothed it over. What's what, honey? Casual. Too casual. This file. Project Atlas. My pitch. Why do you have it? Why are you working on it with Sarah? He sighed, a sound of weary impatience. Oh, that. It's nothing really. Just. Helping you out. I was refining some of the slides. You know, making them more corporate. Polishing it up for you. A lie. A transparent, pathetic lie. He hadn't mentioned helping. He hadn't asked. And he hadn't shared his improvements with me. It has your name on it, Mark. And Sarah's. His jaw tightened. A placeholder. I was just getting feedback from a colleague. Sarah's good with presentations. Feedback? Or are you pitching it yourself? The words were out before I could stop them. My voice was rising. He scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. Why would I pitch your idea? It's not even my industry. I was trying to help you. He walked past me, heading for the kitchen. Look, I'm tired. Can we do this in the morning? He dismissed it. Dismissed me. The casual way he lied, the way he evaded my gaze, the subtle shift in his posture. It wasn't concern for my pitch. It was the arrogance of someone caught, trying to bluff their way out. The sickness in my stomach curdled into bitter certainty. He wasn't helping. He was stealing. The early struggles were internal. A war waged inside my own head. Shock gave way to denial, then to rage, then to a cold, terrifying fear. What did this mean? Not just for my pitch, but for us? For our marriage? Everything felt tainted, soiled. I couldn't look at him without seeing a stranger, a thief hiding in plain sight. My immediate thought was to expose him, to call his company, to send emails, to unleash the truth. But what good would that do? He'd deny it. It would turn into a messy, public spectacle, and it would destroy my own credibility. I was a week away from the most important pitch of my life, and my own husband had stolen my work. How could I pitch the same idea now? It was compromised, tainted. I pulled all my files from the share drive. I changed my passwords. I worked from coffee shops, from libraries, anywhere but home. He seemed not to notice, or perhaps he pretended not to notice my sudden aversion to being in the same room with him. He'd act normal, ask about my day, about my pitch preparations. Each question felt like a fresh insult, a twist of the knife. How's the pitch coming along? He'd ask, stirring his coffee, my words already brewing on his tongue. The fear was crippling. What if he got there first? What if he pitched my idea, even an older version, and succeeded? He worked for a large, well-connected corporation. He had resources I didn't. He had Sarah, who I now realized wasn't just an associate, but a co-conspirator, maybe even the instigator. The thought of them presenting my work, Sharing a triumph built on my betrayal was physically painful. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. My apartment felt like a cage. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every interaction, searching for signs I'd missed. Was he always like this? Was I blind? The man I married, the man who promised forever, was stealing from me, systematically dismantling my dreams for his own gain, maybe to impress his mistress. The thought was so repulsive, so utterly devastating, I sometimes couldn't breathe. The rising challenges mounted like an incoming tide. The pitch date loomed. I knew I couldn't use my original material anymore. It was compromised. But what else could I do in such a short time? This wasn't just an update. It was a full concept, years in the making. The stolen version wasn't perfect, but it was there. It was real. While I had nothing but scattered notes and the burning embers of my rage. I tried working on a completely new concept, but it felt rushed, shallow. My heart wasn't in it. It felt like starting from scratch in a race I was already losing. The pressure was immense. My reputation was on the line. If I pulled out now, I'd be seen as flaky, unreliable. If I pitched something weak, I'd be dismissed. This was my one shot. Mark grew bolder. He'd take calls in the other room, speaking in hushed tones. I heard Sarah's name mentioned more often. Sometimes I'd catch snippets of conversation about market analysis, investor expectations, things that sounded eerily like the topics covered in my pitch. He was doing it. He was actively preparing to steal my moment, my future. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just theft, it was psychological warfare. He was doing it under my roof, while pretending to be my husband. The deepest cuts weren't the stolen ideas, but the casual cruelty of his performance. He'd ask if I needed help practicing. He'd offer unsolicited advice based on his research that was clearly just him reviewing my stolen notes. He was flaunting it, daring me to react, or perhaps so consumed by his own deceit he couldn't see the pain he was inflicting. The situation felt hopeless. He had the polished presentation, the confidence of someone operating without conscience. I had fragmented ideas, a broken heart, and the gnawing fear that he would win, and I would be left with nothing. The closer the date got, the more suffocated I felt. The walls of our apartment seemed to press in on me, trapping me with my betrayer. Then came the midpoint shift. It wasn't a sudden revelation, but a slow, grinding transformation fueled by sleepless nights and righteous anger. I stopped feeling like a victim. The fear didn't disappear, but it was overshadowed by a cold, hard clarity. I wasn't just fighting for my business anymore. I was fighting for myself, for my integrity, for every woman who had ever had her ideas stolen, her voice silenced, her work appropriated by a man taking credit. I realized I couldn't just rebuild my original pitch. That version was tainted. And frankly, it wasn't the best I could do anymore. The betrayal had given me a new perspective. I'd seen the flaws in his version, the places where he'd misunderstood or simplified my core ideas. His theft, ironically, had highlighted the areas where my original pitch could be better. The anger solidified into a plan. Not just to win, but to win in a way that utterly undermined his theft. I wouldn't just pitch my concept. I would pitch a concept that made his stolen version obsolete. I needed a new angle, a disruptive evolution of my original idea that was so clearly ahead, so fundamentally different in its execution, that his stolen draft would look like child's play. And crucially, I needed undeniable proof that he had stolen from me. I started working in secret. Real secret this time. I rented a tiny, anonymous office space across town. I bought a burner phone. I created new email accounts. I worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and a burning desire for vindication. I wasn't just creating a pitch deck, I was building a weapon. I went back through my files. Every draft, every note, every timestamp. I found the original concept document, saved years ago. Email chains with collaborators discussing the early stages. The invoice from the artist for the illustrations, dated months before Mark borrowed the file. I wasn't just collecting evidence, I was reconstructing the timeline of my creation, solidifying my claim, building an ironclad case for intellectual property theft. I also started observing Mark more closely. Not with the eyes of a wife, but with the cold gaze of an opponent. I watched his routine, his habits, the subtle tells when he was lying. I learned his schedule. I listened more carefully to his calls, the ones he didn't take in the other room. I realized he was overconfident, sloppy in his deceit. He thought he had this in the bag. He thought I was either oblivious or too weak to fight back. That was his biggest mistake. The deepening crisis arrived with a calendar. The pitch date was now less than a week away. My new pitch was coming together, but it was complex, ambitious. Could I land it? Could I articulate the subtle but crucial differences that made it superior? Doubts clawed at me. What if I failed? What if, despite everything, he still managed to charm his way into getting the deal with my stolen work? The thought was unbearable. The stress was immense. I barely slept. I ate erratically. My body ached. The physical toll of the betrayal and the secret war I was waging was immense. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself, gaunt, hollow-eyed, but with a fire burning in my gaze I hadn't seen before. At home, the tension was a palpable thing. Mark seemed oblivious, or perhaps he was consumed by his own preparations. He'd talk about his big presentation with a swagger that made my skin crawl. He even asked me to proofread a few slides from my original pitch, now branded as his. I did it, with a smile, and a silent vow. Let him think he's got this. Let him underestimate me. One night, I overheard him on the phone with Sarah. They were laughing, talking about their strategy for the pitch. He's going to love this part, Mark said, referring to a key innovation I had developed. It's a guaranteed win, Sarah's voice, thin and reedy through the wall, responded. Just make sure you give it your signature Mark touch. Darling, darling. The casual intimacy, the shared anticipation of success built on my foundation, sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. They were celebrating their anticipated victory on my stolen battlefield. Everything seemed against me. He had the stolen work, a clear path, and a partner in crime. I had a complex, untested new concept, a mountain of secret evidence, and the crushing weight of emotional exhaustion. It felt like trying to climb a sheer cliff face in a hurricane. Failure felt not just possible, but probable. The crisis wasn't just external, it was an internal battle against despair. Could I truly pull this off? Could I outsmart a man who knew me inside and out, who had so thoroughly betrayed me? The turning point came 2 days before the pitch. I was in my rented office, staring at my new pitch deck. It was good. Better than the original. It addressed market shifts I hadn't fully anticipated when I first conceived the idea. It incorporated feedback I'd received from mentors since then. It was truly disruptive. But it felt like a leap of faith. The original pitch felt safer, more proven, even if stolen. I held the evidence in my hand. The timestamps, the emails, the early drafts. The proof was undeniable. I could expose him now. Send an anonymous tip. Destroy him before he even pitched. But that wouldn't win me the deal. It would just create chaos. And maybe, just maybe, his company would bury the scandal to protect themselves, and he'd escape real consequences. No. This wasn't just about stopping him. It was about winning. Winning big. Winning in a way that didn't just get me the deal, but fundamentally vindicated me and made his theft a liability, not an asset. I looked at my new pitch. It had a section that was completely different from the original. A unique delivery mechanism for the service, something I'd brainstormed only in the last week. It was risky, but revolutionary. It wasn't in his stolen V3. It wasn't anywhere but in my head and on these new slides. That was it. The path forward snapped into focus. I wasn't just going to pitch my new concept. I was going to pitch the future. The version of the idea he hadn't seen, hadn't anticipated, couldn't possibly replicate. And I would ensure the investors understood, subtly or explicitly, that my concept was the legitimate, evolving vision, while his was a static, outdated copy. I called my lawyer. Not the one who handled our wills. A corporate lawyer, specializing in intellectual property. I explained carefully, hypothetically at first. He listened, asked sharp questions. He outlined my options. A lawsuit was one. Reporting him to his company was another. But the most effective, he suggested, might be to let him proceed, secure my win, and then use the evidence to ensure he faced consequences for his actions, consequences that would stem directly from the conflict I created. That night I went home. Mark was already asleep. I stood over him for a long time, the coldness in my chest absolute. There was no sadness, no anger, just emptiness where love used to be. He had made his choice. Now I would make mine. I wasn't the wife anymore. I was the competitor, the hunter, and he was the unwitting prey, walking confidently into a trap he had built for himself using my own materials. The decision was final. I would pitch. I would win. And then I would unleash the consequences. The day of the pitch arrived, thick with tension. The investors were hosting the pitches at their downtown offices. A sleek, intimidating building of glass and steel. The air inside hummed with high-stakes energy. Competitors milled about, looking nervous or overly confident. I spotted Mark across the lobby. He was with Sarah. They were laughing, sharing a private joke. He looked relaxed, arrogant. Seeing them together, preparing to deliver my original pitch, felt like a physical blow, but it also hardened my resolve. Let them have their moment. The fall would be harder. My slot was after lunch. Mark's was just before. I sat in the waiting area, my laptop open, going over my slides. My new slides. They were different. The core problem was the same, the market analysis built on my earlier work, but the proposed solution, the business model, the technology application, it was a significant leap. It felt dangerous and exhilarating. Mark's turn came. I stayed in the waiting area, but the doors to the conference room were open slightly, and I could hear his voice. Confident. Smooth. I heard him describe the problem using my words, my phrasing. I heard him present the market data I had painstakingly compiled. He even used some of my specific turns of phrase, things we'd laughed about when I was practicing with him. It was surreal, like watching a distorted, grotesque performance of my own identity. Sarah's voice interjected occasionally, sharp and precise, adding details she'd gleaned from working through my stolen V3 with him. They were a team built on theft. I felt a cold dread creep in. He was good. He was polished. He was using my best work. What if my new concept was too risky? Too complex? What if they preferred the simpler, proven version he was presenting? The version I had originally created. He finished his pitch. There was polite applause. I saw him and Sarah emerge, beaming. He caught my eye. His smile faltered for just a second, a flicker of something unreadable. Then he nodded curtly and steered Sarah away, whispering something that made her giggle. They looked like the conquering heroes. My turn. I walked into the room. The investors sat around a long, polished table. Their faces were neutral, assessing. I took a deep breath. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about me. About my work. About proving that I was the true innovator. I started. My voice was shaky at first, but it gained strength as I spoke. I presented the market problem, building on the established data, the data I had collected, which they had just seen Mark present. But then I pivoted. I introduced my evolved concept, the new technology application, the revolutionary delivery mechanism, the refined business model that addressed the subtle complexities the original version missed. I saw a shift in the investors' posture. They leaned forward. Their eyes narrowed, not with skepticism, but with intrigue. They asked questions. Sharp, insightful questions that showed they grasped the depth of my innovation. I answered with confidence, drawing on the intensive, secret work of the past few weeks. I could see the difference. Mark had presented a polished copy. I was presenting an entirely new original. I finished. The room was silent for a moment. Then, one of the senior partners, a woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind, spoke. That's Significantly different from the presentation we saw earlier today. Ms. Hayes, she used my maiden name. I had registered my pitch under my maiden name. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. The moment of truth. Yes, I said, my voice steady. It is. My research and concept have evolved considerably over the past few weeks. As I continued to refine the model, it became clear that a more dynamic, technologically integrated approach was necessary to truly disrupt the market. This version represents that evolution. She nodded slowly, her gaze piercing. And the previous presentation, Mr. Hayes's? That was based on an earlier draft, I said, choosing my words carefully. A concept I shared with him during its initial development phase. Seeking feedback, I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. My work has progressed significantly since then. I didn't accuse him directly. Not yet. But I planted the seed. The investors were astute. They'd seen the older, less sophisticated version of the idea just an hour ago. Now they were seeing the legitimate, cutting-edge evolution. The discrepancy was stark. The timestamps on my updated deck, the complexity of the new elements, it all pointed to my version being the true, current innovation. The questions continued, focusing intensely on the new aspects of my pitch. By the end, the atmosphere had shifted from assessment to genuine excitement. They saw the potential. They saw the innovation. They saw my vision. As I was leaving, the senior partner pulled me aside. Ms. Hayes, she said, her voice low. We will be conducting a thorough review of both presentations. Discrepancies in originality and development timelines are taken very seriously. Her gaze was direct. She knew, or, at least, she suspected enough to launch an investigation. I thanked her, a sense of controlled triumph flooding through me. I hadn't just won the pitch. I had triggered the mechanism for his downfall. I had used my own work, not just to succeed, but to expose his theft. The climax wasn't a single explosion, but a series of devastating blows. The first came 2 days later. My phone rang. It was the senior partner from the investment firm. Ms. Hayes, she said, we've completed our review. We are incredibly impressed with your evolved concept. We want to move forward with your proposal. A wave of pure, unadulterated relief and vindication washed over me. I had done it. I had won. Additionally, she continued, her tone hardening, our review of the presentation delivered by Mr. Hayes raised significant concerns regarding its provenance and alignment with his stated expertise. We have shared our findings with his company's HR and legal departments. Intellectual property theft is a serious matter, and frankly, presenting an outdated, less developed version of an idea while claiming it as his own. It reflects poorly on judgment and integrity. I felt a cold, quiet satisfaction spread through me. The trap had sprung. My superior pitch hadn't just won me the deal, it had flagged his version as suspicious, triggering an investigation that would expose his theft internally. I went home. Mark was there, looking nervous. He'd clearly heard something. He was pacing the living room. What happened? He demanded the moment I walked in. Did they say anything to you? I met his gaze, my face expressionless. They called, I said quietly. They accepted my pitch. His eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in suspicion.
What? How?
I thought mine went well. Sarah said it was a slam dunk. Mine was better, Mark. I said, the words like ice. It was the evolved version. The real version. He paled. What are you talking about? That was our work. No, I said, shaking my head. That was my work. That you stole. To pitch with your mistress, I let the word hang there, heavy and sharp. His face contorted. Rage flooded his features. You little bitch. You set me up. You changed it. I didn't set you up, I said calmly. You stole my work. I just continued to innovate. Something you clearly couldn't do. He started screaming. Really screaming. Not just yelling, but a guttural, animal sound of pure, blindsided fury. He screamed about how unfair it was, how I had ruined him, how I had betrayed him. The irony was breathtaking. He was standing there, caught red-handed, his theft exposed because my actual work was simply superior, and blaming me for not letting him get away with it. "Your company called me, Mark," I said, cutting through his noise. "The investors flagged your presentation. They're investigating." His face went ashen. He stopped screaming, replaced by a look of utter, profound shock. He hadn't anticipated this. He thought he was untouchable. He thought I would just roll over. He thought his theft was a secret he could keep. The realization that his own actions, amplified by my strategic response, had created this disaster hit him with the force of a physical blow. He stumbled back, collapsing onto the sofa, staring at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. He had been so focused on stealing my past work, he hadn't even considered the possibility that I was already building the future. The aftermath was a strange mix of triumph and desolation. I got the deal. My business launched with the backing of the investment firm. It was everything I had worked for, but the cost was immense. Mark was fired. Not quietly. His company took the intellectual property theft very seriously, especially given the external flagging by the investors. The scandal rippled through his professional network. Sarah seemed to disappear from his life just as quickly as she'd entered mine. The partner in crime abandoned the sinking ship. Our marriage ended swiftly, and, without ceremony, there was nothing left to salvage. The betrayal had gone too deep. The man I thought I knew was a stranger, a thief, a man who prioritized his ego and a fleeting affair over his wife's dreams. The divorce was brutal, but clean. I fought for what was mine, and I won. Winning the deal felt incredible. Building my business, hiring my first employees, seeing my vision come to life, it was immensely satisfying. But the taste of victory was bittersweet. Every success was underscored by the knowledge of how it had come about, the depth of the betrayal that had fueled my fire. I learned that strength isn't just about enduring, it's about strategizing. It's about not just recovering from a blow, but using the momentum to propel yourself forward. It's about realizing that your greatest asset isn't just your work, but your ability to adapt, to innovate, to be one step ahead of anyone trying to steal your future. Mark stole my pitch, but he couldn't steal my mind, my resilience, or my ability to create something even better. The experience left scars. A deep mistrust of those closest to me. A constant vigilance. But it also forged something stronger. A fierce independence. A certainty in my own abilities. I had faced my deepest fear, having my work stolen, my trust broken, and I had emerged victorious, not by fighting fair, but by fighting smart. My business thrives. My future is brighter than I ever imagined. And the man who tried to steal it all is left with nothing but the wreckage of his own making. It's a cold comfort, perhaps, but a powerful one. He aimed to impress his mistress with my life's work, and instead, he lost everything because I dared to claim it back, in a way he could never have seen coming. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.